We're done, we're ready to go, but we are going.
Why are we double cupping? Is it?
It's too hot otherwise.
Right,
we're done, bro.
Yeah.
All right, are we just going straight into it?
I think so. Ready for it.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So natural. Well, I'm really glad we're doing this because I think that it's something that needs to be talked about, as you all do. But we've started Epi-Sodes, we're 2 months in, and we've got 6 values. One of them is safety. And I think when we started to talk about that, it had one of the biggest feedbacks to anything we've talked about. And you were all part of that sort of process and conversation. I think because of that response, I think it's worth a longer conversation about it. So that's why we're kind of getting together, because I think people have expressed to me they want to hear more about it. It's something that I think in our sphere isn't talked about openly enough. It's sort of like you've got to go, in my experience, you've got to kind of go looking for education and information around the power of safety. So I thought let's do what we can do to bring that conversation a bit more to the front. I think I said at the very start, when I first started talking about it, that I think that people think that safety is just a defensive thing. And yes, it is, but I think it's so much more than just not getting hurt. And so kind of we'll unpack all of that. But you are all experts, far more educated than I am. But so like safety, you're all different professions. And I think at some point, yes, drop in where you're coming from, what your job or context is. But when I say safety, what does it mean to you guys in your space, in your sphere? Darcy, kick us off. So safety,
Yeah.
what do you do and why is safety part of your conversation?
Yeah, so I'm a provisional psychologist, and safety is an integral part of what I have to think about day to day. And I think that we've talked before about how safety can be, just not getting hurt, right? And we can think of that physically, and like in my job, there's things like child protection that we need to be thinking about. There's risk to self, there's risk to others, and that's something that is incredibly kind of on the forefront of what I do at work. But the thing for me is like, it gets me so excited that we're here in a place of worship, in a church, and we're bringing safety to the front of the conversation here. And I think it's really exciting when we start to think of psychological safety. And so, there's so many things that come to mind there. But I think when I think of safety, it's very much kind of my background is thinking about almost kind of what you were saying before. It's our defensive mechanisms. It's when we perceive a threat and that kind of thing. It's how we respond to that. And there are the walls that will come up and the ways that we try to protect ourselves. But then, kind of like what you were saying, when we feel safe, the difference is what we get to then do with that. And so it's so broad. But
why is safety not so publicly and openly talked about? When I go to counselling and I go to debriefing, it's almost like one of the first things that's talked about. So why isn't it part of our public or our Christian or non-Christian? It's not. I don't feel like it's like publicly, openly celebrated, talked about.
I think generationally, right? I'm feeling a little bit old, but I remember when we were growing up, safety was all about physical safety, So it was about, you would do your education for swimming so that you didn't drown and you were safe. Safety was very physically thought through, but not mentally and psychologically thought through. So even when we think generationally, it's only really now after, oh my goodness, like what has happened through life and generations, that safety is a real starting point. Whereas in the past, I feel like it was so down the back. Like when you think generationally, all the things that were tolerated and allowed when it came to in the home, when it came to in society, that it really wasn't something that was at the forefront. So even the generational shift has put safety up quite a few notches. And I think that makes a huge difference.
I would definitely agree with that, because I think, psychological safety in this community, we talk about relationships, we talk about the importance of relationships, but this is the beginning of the how-to. How do I actually create connection? How do I sustain connection? And psychological safety is a huge part of that, because we need the safety really in that regard is about trust. How do I make myself vulnerable, which is needed in building and sustaining a relationship, but how does somebody take care of my vulnerability without intruding on me in some way? And particularly this community, I think, when we're thinking about building strong community, it is about being vulnerable with each other, but how do we really create the safety and the trust in that vulnerability at the same time?
So are you saying you think it hasn't been valued?
I think
And it's only oops, we should have been caring about
when
safety.
you think back generationally and what was tolerated in homes, in domestic situations, you think about in school, you could have gotten the paddle, you could have gotten the strap, you could have that safety was a really distant thing. It didn't matter how you felt. It didn't matter. It was eliminated, really, that whole sense of your safety and your well-being. And it's only in recent days, and like Dusty, you're a psychologist, so you do look a lot at research. I think it's after a lot of years and decades of research that we can look back and go, that was actually trauma. And we never called it that back in the day. But now all this research suggests that those were traumatic experiences that have shaped people's lives, and we need to pay attention to that. And how do we pay attention to that? Probably one of the biggest keys when it comes to trauma is safety, right?
Well, it's actually one of the trauma-informed principles. Safety is one of those. And I think that's because they've realised now that actually we do need to think about that, where people have had traumatic events happen or things have happened to people, that a lot of the training now for people in any of the helping industries is those trauma-informed principles, where safety is like the top one.
Unpack what trauma-informed principles?
So there's all different versions of it, but it talks about collaboration, about choice, about safety, about empowerment, just allowing people to have a choice in what they do for their own care, that we're collaborating, we're not like telling you what you have to do, and just making sure that it's safe when we talk with people and putting those things. So a lot of places now really put those principles in place, but they were unheard of many years ago. Perhaps in some professions they were in place, but more in general society now, I think that they're much more prevalent.
Becoming more mainstream.
Yeah, and I think if we even think about the messaging that we receive in the kind of current society that we live in compared to even just one generation going back around toughen up, man up, all this stuff, where when we speak about safety, what we're actually kind of alluding to is vulnerability in the same sentence. So to speak about safety, we have to talk about what makes us unsafe, which is our vulnerabilities. And I think there's a much kind of wider acceptance around vulnerability now than what there has been. And that gives us, I think, a beautiful space to research more into, well, how do we actually make people feel safe? And how can we talk about this in a way that is making sense with trauma-informed practice, with research, all this kind of thing, so that we can actually start to create spaces for people where they're feeling comfortable. And so generationally, I think what you're saying is spot on, even just in going back 50 years or so. Yeah.
I love what Beth Rothschild says. She talks about safe trauma recovery.
Yes.
And actually, even if you think about the Coke bottle, this is such a visual one that really helped me. So if you think about if you shake up a Coke bottle,
It's getting bad, Susan.
I'm just going to point it towards you, Phil. But if we're not thinking about safety with somebody and we're pushing them, then what can happen is that we try and go to take the lid off, and what do you think is going to happen now if I take this lid off when someone's... It could go everywhere, and then that's going to be not good for them, it's not going to be good, safe for us. Whereas if we are really careful in how we do things and we've got all these, this trauma-informed care, we actually, or safe trauma recovery, we can actually just do it like that, and we just do it a little bit and allow it out, and then a little bit. And eventually, if I kept doing that, I could take the lid off.
Yes.
And it would actually be safe for the person to be able to share their story, but without it spilling everywhere. And because some people, if you destabilise somebody by them sharing too much, or they're being re-traumatised by sharing their story, then it can put them in a position where, you know, you hear horror stories of people can't find their way home from their counselling session because they've just become destabilised.
Yes.
Whereas, so I think the more that we're aware of that, and that we are letting people talk and listen, but we do it in a way that isn't pushing people. And it's doing it at that whole thing of choice, the collaboration, safety, empowerment, actually being able to,
That's where I think the idea of fellow travelling is really important.
I love that.
Particularly in community, because I think, you know, we tend to think that if somebody's sharing a vulnerable story that we've got to help them, or we've got to fix it, or we've got to, you know, bring them to some other place. But there's something about fellow travelling, which is we all have vulnerable stories. We all have vulnerable times. Well, just it's I'm not the expert. Because you're coming to me with a vulnerable story doesn't mean I have to help you fix it, or I have to do anything with it. It just means you're sharing your vulnerable time, your vulnerable story. There may be another time when I'm sharing mine with someone else. We're fellow travellers. We're all on the same journey together. And I think that's much more helpful in a community, when we're building community, to think of it like that, because it's a power equaliser as well. There aren't some people that are just seen as strong people who, you know, minister and help the people that aren't coping.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I'm kind of, you know, polarising it, but that's what tends to happen.
Yes.
And then the people that are classed as the strong people don't have any place to just be human, to be vulnerable, to be authentic.
True. Yeah.
So
That's what I love
really
about
worked for me.
supervision. That's what I do, is the professional pastoral supervision. And that's really caring for the carers. So it's allowing the people who are caring for others somewhere safe for them.
Yes.
But what's interesting about that, I think even in this conversation, is that we're very overt and intentional about safety. So in the very first session, we actually talk about contracting together, where we actually put very clear that this is confidential. You know, this is a safe place. This is somewhere where we have really strong boundaries. We know what the role is. And once they're established, then you can have that fellow travelling, because you are actually in a place where you're doing it together, but it's really clear boundaries up front. But, I mean, you don't necessarily do that every time you meet somebody. So it's how do we do that in a way where it might not be so overt, but yet we're aware of the importance of it, and how do we do that in a way just in general life?
So let's talk about probably even one of the basics. If you're thinking a relationship, a church, an organisation, a school, classroom, some people would go, what is safe? Like what does a safe space look like? Because some people haven't experienced that. Some people are trying to build safety. So what does safe look like? You talk about boundaries, clear boundaries. I go, yeah, that's a universal thing. If it's safe, my agency is respected, your agency is respected, and we can have disagreement and debate and conflict, but those boundaries aren't crossed. I still feel a sense of respect.
I think when you think about a word like safety or safe, it's different for everyone, because it's like when you say God, you know, I might think of God as a loving God, whereas other people might see him as a judgmental God. I think safety is different for everyone. And I think it's taking the time to even know, what does it mean for someone to be safe? What it means for me to be safe would be different to what it means for you to be safe. Yes. So I think that's probably the first thing I would say about what is safety and what is safe, is actually it means different things to different people. I mean, it might have one sort of universal definition. Yes. But what does that actually really mean for someone? And I think what you were saying before about physical safety, for some people that's important. For others it's psychological safety, or even spiritual safety. Yes. Like, what does it mean for someone? So I think that would be the first question to ask ourselves.
And look, that comes through listening, doesn't it? I mean, really it comes through receiving the other person and receiving them where they're at, and listening to where they're at without
Yeah, yeah. But
kind of jumping the gun.
definitely, because I think everybody, everyone's worldview is different. And generally, worldview comes from a family of origin, the experiences we've had, the training we've had. And so everybody that we meet has a story, has all these things that have happened to them over their life that we know nothing about. So we can't assume that they see the world the same as us.
Yes.
And so I love what you're saying. It's about listening and listening to listen, not listening to fix.
Or to respond, listening to
Yeah,
respond.
but to actually really go, I wonder what it's like. And that's where I love that thought about empathy and compassion. You know, I wonder what it's like to be this person here today in this situation. And I think if we come from that place of empathy, then we're really attempting to understand. We never really will fully understand what it's like for someone else, but we can at least show that we're attempting to understand and that the person feels heard and seen.
Yeah.
Listening is definitely such a major key whenever we're wondering how can we make our space safe. So we can hear those messages coming through, and when I think of the themes that come from the people that I speak to, there are often some common ones that come to my mind around feeling criticised and judged, and feeling hurt, feeling betrayed, feeling forced into doing different things in their respective communities. And I think that when we do take the time to listen to the people in our community, that can give us a great direction to start to go, well, these are the threats that are coming up. These are the things that people are speaking about. And then moving forward from there, going, how can we actually create a space where people are free to make decisions, where people are free to share their vulnerabilities in a way where we can hold space and travel with them, rather than feeling like they're needing to be told what to do, what to feel, what to anything like that. And I think in any community, being able to be who you are as your own authentic person is a great kind of, I guess, framework to start thinking about when we go, what is safety meaning here? You know, it's like, well, what are the people saying that makes them feel unsafe? And often we'll get those keys where we can start to really think, what do we need to put in place? Yeah.
And I think for me, that really feels like inclusion, like the real meaning of inclusion, which is it's not us and them. You know, that still kind of exists a little bit in all our forms of community. It's like, come and be part of us, rather than inclusion is about who are you and what do you bring to this community, what you bring to the mix that can add the richness. And there's something that's communicated in that I'm not just bringing you into our place, we're including you, we're bringing you, all of you, into this place, and we're influencing each other and creating a rich tapestry. And that to me is the real meaning of inclusion.
Yes, it's so important. And that's what people want. I think, you know, part of what I do in my work, I work with a lot of children, and there are kind of like core emotional needs that we have when we're infants, when we're children, when we can't survive on our own. And I think the interesting thing is that our brains are very complex and amazing and all those things, but our needs don't change all that much. Do we feel connected? Do we feel heard? Do we feel secure enough that we're willing to try something, to say something, to explore somewhere? And often when we go back to some of these core emotional needs around autonomy and just freedom and feeling, like we're safe, I know that's the buzzword we're talking about, but just to be ourselves, then often there's a real flow from that place. But in the young people that I work with, we see that they haven't been able to experience security, where they haven't been able to express their emotions in a way that is met with love and warmth, but rather they might get isolated and so they lose their connectedness, or there is a harsh criticism that comes around it. Then we internalize all those things, meaning we take it into ourselves and we don't feel safe in our own bodies. We can't express ourselves. We're taught that that's not okay. And so often my mind will come to that when we think about what is safety. It's what needs do we all share? What themes do we all have that we can use as a framework to go, well, let's put some structures in place to make sure that happens. You know, if there's leadership involved, maybe it's about how do we actually communicate with people that share their stories? Like, amazing analogy with the Coke bottle. We can start there. Like, we don't need to come in and fix. We've talked about some of these things already, but it's really going down to core needs and making a space for that to be okay. That's the human experience that we have. And we're not better than each other. So you're right, there's no us and them. It's just all of us, every single one.
That's so good.
On the journey. Yeah.
In chaplaincy, we talk a lot about roadblocks to communication. which I think is really helpful, because when you're with somebody and you're trying to either fix or judge, 'cause I think judgment's a huge blocker of communication. As soon as someone feels judged, they shut down in general, I think. But some of the other roadblocks are things like someone starts to share a story and then you go, oh, I know somebody who's had that happen, and then you start to share your story or another person's story, and then the person feels like their story is not important. And so it's just all those little things that we
I've
can...
done your story with
That's
my
right,
story.
I'll up you one. Yeah. But it's amazing how much we do that.
Why do you think people do that?
Because I think they're attempting to say, oh, I understand what it's like for you because I've had this happen to me.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's from a place of they're trying to...
No, and I think that's part of normal social discourse.
Yeah, that's right. And
I mean,
sometimes
I
that
think
is
we do that.
sometimes that is
Yeah, it
appropriate.
is, yeah.
But I think not at the expense of listening to the person's
Yeah,
story.
when somebody really needs to be telling their story.
That's right, yeah. It's actually being allowed to... someone to share their story. And I even find validation is a really important thing. Like if somebody starts to share something or someone's angry, just that somebody actually acknowledges the fact that this is hard or this is difficult or, you know, that to normalise things for people. So they feel like, because often people feel like they're totally alone in the suffering that they're, but to know that perhaps that's a normal thing. Whatever normal is, but you know, it's to normalise and validate can really help people. But just having that connection, and we can always make a connection somewhere with somebody.
And to some degree, that's skills, isn't it? Like even eye contact, and just for a moment before I then give my piece, is it's just that moment of connection that lets somebody know you've heard me, you've connected. And it's okay then to move on to the next thing and the next story, but there's that moment of connection. And I think sometimes we haven't learnt those skills or we forget those skills, but they're so important. They're just little
When
ones.
you all sit with a client or someone for the first time, are people, and you, I'm sure you all have your opening, the contracting, you know, this is our arena of healing, this is our parameters. Are people quick to go, cool, I'm up for this? Or is it not until session, if we call that, or session 5 that they finally go, okay, I can do this? How quick are people? Have they come to you when they're already in emergency mode? So as soon as they've got any green light, it's game on. This is burst out of me.
I would probably be the one, because I'm a counsellor and a psychotherapist. So I see private clients, and most of my therapy clients would come in a crisis.
Yes.
So they are ready. They are more ready to trust me.
There's a gush.
But in general, I would say it depends on me. So it really, and I've noticed that over time. I mean, I've been practicing. Yes, I've been practicing for decades, and as I've become more authentic, as I've become more relaxed, as I've become more me. And there's something that allows the other person to trust me, because I'm not just an expert sat behind the persona of a therapist or someone who's going to help them. I'm just coming as me.
So do you think people are unsafe to someone partly because they don't feel safe themselves?
I do think that safety doesn't only belong to the professional or to the person that's helping. Yes, definitely, because I can provide a lot of safety, but it depends on that person whether they feel safe and their experiences of whether they feel safe or not. But I think that we sometimes think we've got to be the expert because that's what they're looking for. What they're looking for is, yes, I have to feel safe in me. I have to know me, to know where my boundaries are and be safe about who I am for them to feel that in the dynamic together. But the more authentic and real I am, they get there much quicker, much quicker.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's really important, I think, because you've talked about authenticity, and that's a value that we come as ourselves. You know, we're not coming as an expert to try and do something to the other person. It's that fellow travelling, I think, again. I mean, I obviously don't share my personal problems to my clients, but I'm really authentic about life's tough, you know, like we do, you know, I understand the journey. And when people relax, you can see them visibly relax. And trust me when I'm sharing that I'm just a human being like you are, and I've got through tough times, and I'm here to, you know, walk with you while you go through your tough time. And you can see them physically relax.
And when I talk with people and in a pastoral setting, a sense, and I see that moment of the guards down, I almost feel like that's a lot of the battle won.
Yes, it is.
Because it's...
Yes, because they don't feel alone.
They
You know,
don't
the
feel
biggest problem is that people feel alone.
Yeah.
They feel like everybody else is coping, everybody else is got it sorted, everybody else is stronger. And the moment they feel like, oh, okay, you know, I'm not the only one. This is a human journey. That's more than half the battle. Honestly, it really, really is.
Yeah.
So, and to me, that's all about safety. That's the safety to just go, I can just be me. I can just have the
all right,
journey.
so I'll take that.
Yeah.
Why are people so poor at it? Why are people, well-meaning people, why are churches, why are good organisations, why are families so poor at it?
Yeah.
Let's unpack from your experiences, your insight.
I think it's actually quite difficult to sit with someone in pain. And so people then have their own response to that, and then they do things like try and fix it, because they want to try and do something. But in supervision and some of the helping professions that we're talking about here, it's like you get trained in a way, some people do it naturally, to hold the space, which means that you are actually helping to create a safe space for someone to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And that relationship is just so important, the supervisory relationship, when we're talking about, like, we're very more overt, but it's that holding that space allows a person to share. And for people who aren't trained or aren't used to doing it, it's really hard to hold it. You actually you try and jump in and do something. Tell a story, or
Because you're uncomfortable with silence.
because you're uncomfortable.
Right?
Yeah. And you know, and things like transference, because you walk into this space that you're trying to hold, all these emotions are swirling around, and then they come from the person onto you. And so then you have like the co-transference or counter-transference that comes on, and then you start to feel it, and then all you're worried about is thinking about yourself. Am I okay? And you're not present anymore with that person and holding the space. So I work with a lot of chaplains who, they actually, when they realise that what they're doing is such a gift to people, because they're holding space and they're not, it's like an uncontaminated space in a way, where I'm not putting all my things in, but actually I'm allowing you to put it's like being objective, and allowing the person to share without me coming in and putting my 2 cents worth in. I mean, there might be at a point where I will, depending on what's going on, but it's that whole thing of holding space. That's not an easy thing to do.
But don't you think in general that we tend to think that we're supposed to have the answers? I mean, not even us as professionals, but just like generally people think that if they hear somebody being vulnerable or with a crisis or an issue, that we feel like we've got to have the answers. And I think it's undoing some of those simple internalisations that we've made, that when somebody comes with a vulnerability, we've got to help them, we've got to have the answers, because there's so much richness in actually not having the answers, particularly for people of faith, you know, sitting in that place of not having the answers, but I'm accompanying you I'm with you in that place of not having the answer yet, is so valuable.
Yeah, I've got a simple model I have, which is support before action. And so it's obviously unpacked a lot more, but it's a really simple principle. When someone starts to talk to you, you just go, hold off on the action and go support. Can I validate? Can I listen? What can I hold the space? So it's the support in terms of just like being with the person. And then and you'll find that after a while, if you do that, the person eventually goes, then you can go into the action. Okay, what are we going to do? And you can be doing that together.
Well, they actually connect to their own thinking.
Yeah, that's right. And it's when you can empower, and then the person actually has their own, finds their own solutions.
I ask people, what would you say to yourself? And they often know.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah. No, fully.
But if you go straight to the action, then you miss the support side.
Yeah.
And it actually, it's
And
just
really,
a simple way.
it's easier. It's easier
Yeah.
to not have to have the answers. Really.
It is, but it's hard. My
In the beginning,
experience of late is having worked as a pastor and feeling like when you sit with people, you've got to give an answer, a Bible verse or, you know, an encouragement or something practical for them to walk away with, something concrete. Whereas my work now is in the pastoral care chaplaincy space in healthcare. So now my day-to-day has moved to a space that I actually don't have the answers for. So I'm with people who are grieving, walking the journey with people as they're losing a loved one, and I don't have an answer. I literally have to sit with people some days as they watch their loved one pass away. And it's exactly what you're saying. I'm just holding space in that arena. I'm just being present in that arena. And the shocking thing, at first in this role, I used to go home and think, I'm doing nothing. Like, what am I doing? This is almost a pointless job. But the feedback that I get now, people like having been there for a while, is like, oh, she was amazing. Thank you so much. And I go home and think, I literally did nothing.
Surreal, isn't it?
I literally said nothing. All I did was sit with someone, so maybe hold a hand, maybe a hand on a shoulder.
Shouldn't we be sharing this
Maybe
with each
just
other?
looking into
This is
someone's
the stuff we
eyes.
should be sharing, right?
Yeah.
That the listening is 99%
Percent of it. But I've moved now and I've actually understood that now it's not that I don't have to have an answer. I don't have to have a Bible verse. I don't have to have something to say and bring to put in your hand to go away and do this or practice this. Literally being with somebody.
Your presence. Yes.
Presence is such a, I don't even know what the word is, fill the space professional people there. Like,
How has it changed your leadership or your faith?
Yeah.
Like you're a leader in church and out of church. It's who you are.
Yeah.
How has that changed? Has it changed how you do church?
Yes,
how you lead church?
I would
and
say
how?
definitely. I would say it's made me realise that sometimes the most powerful thing I can do is shut up.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep. And as someone like me, if you know me, and some of you do, I am a real make it happen doer. If there's a space, I'll fill it with a word. Like, I got something to say, and it's really taught me people don't need my words. People don't need me to fix things. People just need me to sit with them in that space. And then they feel safe, and then they can share. And honestly, like, it blows my mind that people will come to me days, maybe a week later, and go, thank you so much for what you did. I so appreciate for what you did.
That was the biggest lesson that I had.
Huge lesson for someone with my temperament and personality.
Difficult, or like a difficult lesson, or just a next step in your
A
development?
difficult lesson, but one I had to learn very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Difficult because I think of my temperament and my yes, Darcy across there is nodding. Yeah, difficult, but so valuable. And now I literally will walk into a room, say nothing. Hand on shoulder, hand on, and be with someone, because I realise the power in just being with somebody and the safety.
Would you say
that
that's a
brings.
humbling thing? Because I'm thinking as you're speaking and recognising that lesson that I learned, it felt really humbling and really precious at the same time.
Yeah. Super humbling. Super humbling that all these years I've said all these words that really were pointless and probably didn't make any difference in people's lives.
One of the things that I reflect on as we're kind of discussing how almost counterintuitive it is to sit with rather than to fix and solve. I think that we can also give ourselves almost a little bit of a break in the sense of going, like, I think it's important to remember that our brains and our histories are kind of guiding us to solve problems. As people, we don't like pain. We are hardwired to avoid the pain, because pain is the threat to us, right? And so if you're listening to this thinking, oh my goodness, I'm a problem solver, and that's what it is. It's coming out of a really natural and understandable place. And I think one of the things when I think psychologically about creating safety within ourselves and in our communities is one of the really fascinating things that we find to be true is that avoidance of pain is the maintaining factor of pain. So rather when we learn to sit with pain, then we build the skills and the internal safety to be able to handle some things that are challenging for us. And so, yes, we all want to avoid pain and we all hear a story from the person across the table from us and that elicits our own thoughts and memories about our pain and we all go, let's fix this. That's okay. But part of the truth in that is going, well, first we need to sit with that. And often that sense of I'm doing nothing with my client, right, is actually sitting with them in the pain rather than going straight to the, okay, like if you don't like having conversations, then don't do it anymore. We go, hang on, well, that's not really going to solve the problem, is it? Let's learn how to sit with those feelings. Let's actually be, I guess, being brave enough and compassionate enough with ourselves to just be okay with that. And it's interesting because the reflection that you're having is going, I've done nothing, but the feedback I'm getting is incredible. So I think that's an amazing thing to be able to reflect on, that what feels like we're not solving anything, but sitting with is exactly that, and just being with and connecting, and so that's what comes to my mind as you guys are reflecting on that so wonderfully.
And I think that balance is important because we don't want to make it sound like the problem solving bit isn't important at all. It's just that, like you said, the support comes before the action, and there's something about the support and the holding that allows the person themselves to move to action and to problem solving, which we can still be a part of, but it's all about timing.
And that's what I think, that safety isn't just defensive, because if you are unsafe, you don't get to that, the healing, the action, the growth, the next step, because you're stuck here. But that's why I think safety isn't just about not being hurt. If you're safe, then you can. It's powerful. Whereas that's why I feel if I'm unsafe, I'm just stuck in survival or in I'm stuck here. It's when I feel safe, okay, I can take a step. I can move forward.
And part of that is about emotional processing, because if I'm not heard, I'm not processing the emotional content. So I need to be heard. My story needs to be received for me to emotionally process and move on to the next.
So like when I'm thinking of Epi-Co, right, and going, we want to be a safe church, a safe organisation, it's the picture in my head is not just, it's not just a place that you're not going to get hurt. Because yes, that's true. Or, no, we'll do our best to not hurt anyone. But it's not just you're not going to get hurt. It's actually, if we can be safe, imagine what people can do. Imagine what will come from it. Because we're not just gloves on, shields up, just protection, survival, which is what we've all been there. We all know what that feeling's like. So to me, that's, in our church, it's not just about defensiveness, it's about
if you
growth.
Think about what you've just said, like with the values that we've brought to the table, safety is almost, if you were to put them in order, has to be the first thing. Because it's out of safety that we can be authentic. When we feel safe,
and kind,
and even creativity. You talk about kids that have had, trauma and like they lose their creativity, right? It's like without
you won't dream
safety,
if you feel it.
Without safety as a foundational core value, everything else falls to the wayside. And it's just it's so interesting that it can be something that we actually put at the peripheral, but it should be the central.
I think agenda is another thing to think about. If people think that you're listening to them because you want to get something from them, I think that's something. I think that's something that is worth thinking about in this area of safety. Is like if you're listening to somebody, like what do you? And I think churches can be like that. If someone comes into church, they might go, What do you want from me?
Strings?
Yeah, that's right. Like, are you wanting me to do this, or are you wanting me to do that? But actually, if we embrace people in a way where you are loved and accepted and belong, which is what everyone's, and we care about you, and about your gifts and the things that you love and what gives you life, and we help the person to find those, then they become part of our community. But then it also then allows them to use their gifts to help the wider community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that for me is a big thing about safety,
Yeah.
is about us not
Yeah.
listening with an agenda. I mean, we all have agendas and aims and things like that. You know, you can't help, that's how we all function generally, but it's about accepting people for who they are rather than what they can do or what they can give us
Or what we want from them.
or what we want from them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one.
So safety is really the platform that everything else comes from. Yeah.
Nice summary, Dinah. Nice summary.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
We should have just started with that.
Get to that.
Yeah. But how wonderful that we're having this conversation even, that we're putting safety as central and we're also unpacking it.
Yeah.
Like, what does it actually mean?
Yeah,
and
fully.
how do you apply it? How do you actually do it? Yeah.
Because I've been thinking about in a church setting, so often the communication is one way, so it can be very, and because there's teaching, you as a pastor you teach the people, as worship leaders you worship, like it's the posture of it can feel very one way, and so that whether someone feels safe or unsafe, you have to be so intentional, because it can be I can talk at you whether you feel safe or unsafe.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, in a church setting why it cannot be a priority or not a priority.
I do think that's
Do you
important.
know what I mean? Like,
I
it
do
can
think
be-
that's important though, because in some ways, when I'm sitting listening to you, I'm in my own safety of whether I agree with you or not, or how I feel
Yeah,
about
sure.
it, how I fit it in. But I think that can't be the only thing. I think there's got to be other forums where I can then say
Yeah.
how it relates to me and what
Yeah.
my opinions
Yeah.
are. So
It's like, because one of the biggest thing is the Alpha course, which is a course where people explore faith, and it's very intentionally done where people can come and not agree. People can come and have conversation,
Yes.
and some of the in a church setting, some of the worst is the wrong word. A lot of the training is for the people facilitating it. Don't talk, don't tell, listen. Let people have an opinion, and it's creating safety.
Safety for people to feel.
And then
able
people
to
go
say
on
what
their
they
own
think.
journey, and whatever happens. That's between them and God, and them. That's their own journey.
That's where that non-judgmental comes
Yeah,
in.
but so often we are in a church setting. Okay, you're here. I'm going to tell. I'm going
What
to
you
come
should
at
believe.
you. This is a one way, and it's like, no. Like the Bible talks about fellowship, which is not one way. Fellowship is very iron sharpening iron, communion. It's all togetherness and. Anyway, that's it.
So I think it's about providing lots of different forums
Yes.
where people can find their level of safety in
Yes,
those
yes,
forums.
Yes, yeah.
Definitely.
Safety is a platform. I really like that.
Yeah.
I think that churches, businesses, and there's lots of different settings where there is a underlying message that is kind of set in stone. There's a particular goal, there's a particular, I don't know if agenda is the right word, but let's just use that word for now, where it can pose a real challenge for anyone in leadership to be able to, how do we juggle safety and authenticity and autonomy when what we believe on a set of values is clear? How can we not compromise on some values but then also uphold others? And I think that
that's a
what
good
we're
point.
doing, and I think that is so special about where the church is able to move into, is being able to balance that in a way that we haven't seen in history. I think that church has a real record of causing lots of hurt. There are lots of people that have serious damage from their church experiences where they didn't feel safe. But now that we get to have this conversation and set from the beginning of like, we want to uphold a space where people can make free decisions, but we want to facilitate a particular worldview and do that really well, is such a unique and special opportunity that we have, that we can kind of actually come back to the core values of our belief systems and do it in a way that gets to, I guess, spark what's inside other people rather than it being the authority to the inferior. But it's collaboration now. And even that we're around this table collaborating right now, that is speaking to that. And I think that it's an amazing opportunity to be in a community where you can have that. You can have people support you towards growth, but not in a way that is forceful, not in a way that is fueled by criticism and judgment and all those things, but rather comes back to actually wanting to support the person in front of us. And that be a two-way street.
And in some ways, we haven't mentioned these words yet, but for me, that's about power and control. And even if we think about the physical unsafety in some communities, that's about not understanding power and control. And I love these ideas about letting people have their journey and accompanying them in their journey, which isn't about controlling what people believe or controlling how people behave, but just having this open sense of inclusion where you're accepted and understanding that the collective space is drawing people into that authentic place, which is always going to be, has a purity of its own, really, without power and control coming from the outside. And that's what I really love about the things that we're talking about here is not pushing into that power and control where I'm wanting you to be a certain thing, but I'm actually just discovering who you are and inviting you in, and then we all change together. We all grow together in this, you know, the purity of the form that we're coming together in. So,
It's a good place to end, I reckon. So sort of you feel like there's many aspects that we can talk about. Like I've been thinking next conversations could be around if you are feeling unsafe, how do you reclaim safety, or how do you? We've talked about. I think our conversation is largely about the value of importance of safety, but as organisations, how do we build safety? But I thought next time we could talk about if you feel unsafe, how do you reclaim that? What can you actually do? Because people either bottle up and would break down or explode in order to I just need my... So I feel like there's so much to unpack, but I think for today, I do hope, and I know you guys do, that this at least places value on it and brings this conversation to the front for people and churches and organisations, whatever, to be like, the safety shouldn't be just after the damage is done, let's talk about it, let's bring it to the front, celebrate it.
Build on that.
I think that's awesome, and I love that you brought us together.
Thanks for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, awesome.